In today's two-part video, we're going to be looking at factorizing quadratic equations. So this is a follow-up video from the previous video where we looked at factorizing linear equations. And in this video, we are going to go over 3 common examples that we are likely to see in the exam and how to work through these. So starting off with the basics, when we factorize a quadratic equation, we need to put this into 2 brackets versus when we did linear equations, we put it into 1 bracket. Now, before we start factorizing, we need to get the equation into this general format here, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are integers. Now, the first example that we're going to look at is when a, the number in front of x, equals 1. So an example here, the equation will look something like this. X squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. So there's no number in front of x. So if we were asked to factorize this, the first step that we would do is make sure that it has been rearranged into this format here, which we can see by looking at the equation it has been. So that's done. The next step is we write out double brackets. And it must equal 0. That's very important. We'll get to this stage after. And to find out what goes into these brackets, we need to find 2 numbers that multiply to give us c, and those same 2 numbers need to add or subtract to give us b. So straight away I can think of 5 and 3, because 5 multiplied by 3 gives us 15c, and 5 plus 3 equals 8, b. So now we're going to use these 2 numbers to fill in our brackets. Now with these types of equations, we always have x at the beginning of the brackets, and we're going to have these 2 numbers at the end, so 5 and 3, and we need to add 5 and 3 together, so we're going to put a plus sign in both of them. So that's our factorizing done. And one extra step that we're going to do to make sure that this is correct is we're going to do a check of multiplying these brackets out, and we should get this original equation that we started with. So simply just multiply across. That will give us x squared plus 3x plus 5x plus 15 equals 0. If we simplify, we get x squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. So yeah, they match. So this factorizing here is correct. Now the next step that we're going to do is, with these types of questions, we can be asked to solve for x. Now, if we just need to factorize, this is our answer right here, it's done. But if we need to solve for x, which is quite common in exam questions, we need to actually give the values for x. And as you can see here, because it's quadratic, this equation, there are going to be 2 values for x. So what does this actually mean, this factorization here? This means that if we break it up, x plus 5 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. So we've just taken away the brackets. Now, we don't want x plus 5 or x plus 3. We want just x. So the values for x will be minus 5 and minus 3. And here we have solved for x. Okay, so let's look at some practice questions now. Okay, so same thing as before. Let's get it into the format of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And you can see here, it's already in that format, which is great. So we can go ahead and start to factorize now. So let's write out our double brackets. So 2 numbers that multiply to give us c, and those same numbers add or subtract to give us b. I can think of 6 and 3. So 6 times 3 is 18, plus 6 minus 3 gives us plus 3. So let's use these numbers in our brackets. So x always at the front. Now the two numbers, we're going to use +6 and -3. And I know we need to just factorize, but let's just solve for x while we're doing this. Okay, so before we do that, quick check to make sure that we have factorized correctly. If this doesn't give us this original equation, we know something's gone wrong and we need to go back and change these numbers. Okay, so this will give us x squared minus 3x plus 6x minus 18 equals 0. Simplify. Okay, that checks out fine. So now let's solve for x. So this factorization here tells us that x plus 6 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. So we're just getting rid of the brackets. Okay, so we want x. So x equals -6 and x equals 3. Okay, moving on to the next one. It's in the correct format. Let's write our double brackets. And just a heads up here, in order for us to factorize this way, we need this to equal to 0. So if there's ever a number here, we move everything over. Otherwise, this factorization technique won't work. Okay, so two numbers that multiply to give us 12, add or minus to give 7, or -7. I can think of -4 and -3. So -4 times -3 gives us +12, and -3 minus 4 gives us -7. So I think we've got our numbers here. -4, -3. Quick check before we solve. Okay, looks good. So solving for x. Okay, there we go. Okay, so example 2. This is where we get an equation where a, the number in front of x, is not 1. We've got that a equals 2. So it can be any number, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Now, when we get an equation like this, we need to approach it in a different way to actually factorize it. So it's quite similar to the first example, but we just need to do a few different number combinations to actually find out what goes into the bracket. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So first thing, again, we get it into the format ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So that checks out. So we're going to do double brackets. So let's write those out. Equals 0. Now with the previous example, because x squared was just on its own, we knew that at the front of both brackets we were just going to have x, because x times x is x squared. That's fine. But here, because there's a number in front, it might be 2x here, or it might be 2x here and just x here. We're not sure. So we need to try out a few different number combinations to actually get to the numbers that we need to put into these brackets. Okay, so the way we do that in these examples is we find two numbers again, but this time to multiply to give us c, and now two separate numbers that multiply to give us a, and the sum of those should equal this middle number. Okay, so let's have a go. The more practice we do, the easier this becomes. It might sound a bit confusing, but once you start doing it, you'll realize it's pretty easy. Okay, so two numbers that multiply to give us 3, we can do 3 and 1. Two numbers that multiply to give us 2, we can do 1 and 2. So now we cross multiply. 6 and 1. Now plus 6 plus 1 gives us 7, which is b. So these two here are now our brackets. So let's write these down. So 1, 1x and 3, 2x and 1, and we're going to be adding both of them. So put a plus sign in each of them, and that's our factorization done. So quite similar, but a little bit different to example 1. Again, it just takes practice and it becomes really easy to spot. Okay, so same as before, we need to multiply out before we solve for x, just as a check that this factorization is indeed correct. So we've got 2x squared plus x plus 6x plus 3 equals 0. When we simplify, that gives us 2x squared plus 7x plus 3, which matches here. Okay, so we know our factorization is correct. Now let's solve for x. Again, we're just getting rid of the brackets. X plus 3 equals 0. 2x plus 1 equals 0. So x equals minus 3 and x equals minus half. Now let's do some practice questions. Okay, so here this is in the format ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We can see the number in front of x is not 1, it's 3. So we're going to use the method we used in example 2 to factorize this. So let's draw out our double brackets. Okay, so two numbers are multiplied to give us A and two numbers are multiplied to give us C. So 3 and 1, 1 and 3, 9 and 1, and this needs to add or subtract together to give us minus 8. So to get minus 8, we would have to do minus 9 plus 1. So yeah, seems like that works. So these two are now our brackets. So let's just copy this over. 3x, 1, 1x, 3. So we're going to do minus 9x plus 1x. And that's our factorization done. So let's solve for x as well. But before we do that, let's do our check. So this is just a 2-minute check, but it really helps out in avoiding any small mistakes and really giving us confirmation that our factorization and our methodology is correct. It really helps in the exam. Simplify this. Okay, looks good. Now let's solve for x. Rid of the brackets. So x equals minus 1 over 3 and x equals 3. All done. Okay, now moving on to the next one. Okay, so let's check it's in the correct format. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Good. Let's get our double brackets. Two numbers are multiplied to give us 5, 5 and 1. Two numbers are multiplied to give us 6. We can do 2 and 3. Cross multiply. And what you'll notice is when you do this, you will start to know in your head if we add or subtract these numbers, if we're going to get this middle number here. Okay, so sometimes you need to switch up the positionings. So we need here to get positive 13. So we're going to do plus 15 minus 2. Okay, so that checks out. And these become our brackets now. So copying that over, 5x, 2, 1x, and 3. Now we need plus 15x minus 2x to give us plus 13x. So factorising done, quick check. Okay, all good. Now let's solve for x. So getting rid of the brackets, 5x minus 2 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. So 5x equals 2, x equals 2 over 5, and x equals minus 3. Okay, so I hope you found that all good. Now we're going to move on to the last example in this video. And this is a bit of a bonus one. It's using the quadratic equation. Now, so far, in the other two examples that we've looked at, we've always tried to work out under the assumption that the equation can be factorized. But sometimes what you'll see in exam questions is that certain quadratic equations actually can't be factorized. We can't find two numbers that multiply to give us C and then the sum gives us B. It just doesn't work. We try a few different combinations and we realize this can't be simplified. But there are still values for x. There's still a way to solve it. So how do we find those values? We use something called the quadratic equation, which is where we sub in the numbers from that equation into this, and it gives us the two values for x. Okay, and this equation can be used for all quadratic equations, whether a is 1 or a is 2, 3. All we need are the values for a, b, and c for this to work. Now, this is usually used as a last resort because it would be quicker to factorize the way we did in example 1 and 2. But if we're ever faced with a quadratic equation that no matter how many combinations we do, it won't match, and it looks like it can't factorize, we will need to use this to find the solutions. Okay, and just a heads up here, this formula isn't given in the exam, so we do need to learn this. But again, just like the other examples, once you start using this method, it's very easy to memorize. So let's look at an example question. Let's leave this equation up. So we're going to look at this question here. So a is not 1, so we need to find two numbers that multiply to give us a, two numbers that multiply to give us c. And if we add or subtract those numbers, it should give us b, as looked at in the previous example. Okay, so let's try that out. 2 and 1 for a, 1 and 1 for c. Now if we cross multiply, that gives us 1 and 2. Now, no matter which way that I rearrange these numbers, I'm always just going to get 1 and 2, and that does not add or subtract to give us 4. So it's looking like this can't be factorized, okay? But we still need to solve and give the values for x. So this is where this equation comes in. So the first step would be to write out the values for a, b, and c. So as we know, a is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c is the integer on its own. And just a pointer here, if this was minus 4x, b would therefore become minus 4. And if this was minus 1, c would therefore become minus 1, not plus 1. That is something that I see a lot of students get confused with, and that will lead to them entering different numbers into this equation and getting a completely different answer. So just something to look out for. So we've got our values for a, b, and c. Now let's sub in these values into this formula, and we're going to use our calculator for this. So first let's write out the equation on here and then enter that into our calculator. So minus b, minus 4, plus or minus, and this is how we get two values for x, because it is a quadratic equation, meaning there is going to be two values for x. We are going to have one equation where we add the square root of b squared, etc., and then another equation that we enter into our calculator where we minus the square root of b squared, etc. So let me actually write that down here. So I'm going to write out both of the equations that we need to input into our calculator. So the first one, minus b plus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and we're going to divide all of that by 2a, which is 4. Okay, so that's the first equation. The way we get the second value for x is we do minus b, exactly the same as this, but we're just going to minus instead of plus. So all the other numbers are exactly the same, so just copy that out. All over 2a. Okay, so we're going to input this equation into our calculator, exactly how you see it here on screen. Okay, and assuming we need to give our answer to 2 decimal places, the first value for x is minus 0.29. And now we're going to get the second value. So we're not going to delete anything. We're just going to change this plus to a minus and then press equals. So the second value for x, again to 2 decimal places, is minus 1.71. And here you can see why we couldn't factorize, because when the values of x are decimals, they can't be input into brackets. We're only dealing with whole numbers when we do that. Okay, and another tip is that if you're asked in the exam to solve for x and the question specifically says give your answer to 2 decimal places, that there is a given that you need to use the quadratic formula. So you don't need to kind of play around with number combinations. You can just straight away go in and use this formula. But if it doesn't, then we try a few numbers. If it doesn't work, then you will know that, okay, I need to use this. Now let's do one more example question, then I'll hand it over to you. So we've got this in the format ax squared plus bx plus c. Let's try factorizing this. A is 1, so let's just try 2 numbers I multiply to give this, but add or minus to give this number here. So for c, the only 2 numbers I multiply to give 1 is 1 and 1. And we're not going to add or minus that to get 4. Okay, so straight away, we don't need to do too much trial and error. We know that factorization here is not going to work. So we need to go to the quadratic formula. Now let's write down, before we input anything, the values for a, b, and c. So that's 1, minus 4, and 1. So the value of x is going to be minus b, so positive 4 in this case, plus or minus plus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. And the second value is the exact same formula as this, but just with a minus here instead of a plus. And again, in our calculator, we just need to enter one of these equations, and then when we want the second value, we just change the plus to a minus. Okay, so it won't take too long. Now let's input this into our calculator. Okay, so the first value of x that we get, assuming 2 decimal places, is 3.73. And the second value, so I'm just changing the plus to a minus, is 0.27. Now you can, if you wanted to check, you can input these values into here and you should get 0 as long as you do the non-rounded number. So you just use answer on your calculator. If you sub in these full values into x, you will get 0. Okay, just as we looked at in the previous examples. Okay, I'm not going to do that now, but if you want to do that as a check, that's fine. Moving on now to some practice questions. Here we have 8 questions, and these are all a mix of questions from examples 1, 2, and 3. So this is how it will be in the exam. It won't specifically tell you how to work things out. You just have to solve for x. And using the methods we went over, we will be able to differentiate which method to use to actually solve for x here. So if you just want to pause the video and attempt all of these, and we'll go over them together once you're done. Okay, so the first one, with all of these questions, we got to make sure that the format is correct. So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Looks fine. Okay, a is not 1, so let's write out our double brackets. So two numbers are multiplied to give us a, two numbers are multiplied to give us 1. So 3 and 1, 1 and 1, cross multiply. And yet plus 1 plus 3 gives us b. So these should be our double brackets. So 3x and 1, x and 1. And we're going to plus both of them. Okay, and we need to solve for x. So 3x plus 1 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. So x will equal 1 minus 1 over 3. And it will equal minus 1. Moving on to the next one. So the format looks correct. Get the double brackets. Two numbers that multiply to give us 10 and that add or subtract to give us 7. I can think of plus 5 and plus 2. Okay, that looks fine. So let's solve for x. X plus 5 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0. Therefore x equals minus 5 and x equals minus 2. Okay, moving on to the third one. Format is correct. Double brackets. So two numbers to give us 4. Two numbers that multiply to give us 6. So we'll try 2 and 2 and 3 and 2. Here we get 6 and 4. So yeah, plus 4 plus 6 gives us plus 10. So these two are our brackets. So let's copy that over. 2x, 2, 2x, 3. And we're going to add in both of them. Now let's solve for x. So 2x plus 2 equals 0. 2x plus 3 equals 0. Therefore x is going to be minus 1. And here x is going to be minus 3 over 2. Okay. Fourth one. Format looks correct. Same thing as before, double brackets. Two numbers are multiplied to give us 3. Two numbers are multiplied to give us 2. So 3 and 1 and 2 and 1. Cross multiply 6 and 1. So to get minus 5, we got to do minus 6 plus 1. Okay, so that looks like our two double brackets. Let's copy that over. 3x and 1, 1x and 2. So we're going to do minus 6x plus 1x. Okay, so the values for x, 3x plus 1 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. Therefore x will be minus a third plus 2. Question number 5. Here we can see this isn't in the right format. Why? Because this needs to equal 0 here. Okay, so we're going to just take that over. So if we rewrite this equation, that is going to give us x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Now it's in a format where it can be factorized. A is 1, so we know we're going to have x here and x here. We just need two numbers that multiply to give us 6 and add or minus to give us 5. So I can think of minus 3 and minus 2. they add to give us -5, and if we multiply two minuses together, we get a +6. So here x equals 3 and x equals 2. Moving on to number 6, format is correct. Do the double brackets. So we need two numbers and multiply to give us 4 and two numbers and multiply to give us 1. Then if we cross multiply, the sum should give us -6. So for 4 we can do 2 and 2, and for 1 it will have to be 1 and 1. 2 and 2, that's just 4. Okay, so that doesn't work. We can try 4 and 1 and 1 and 1. That will give us 5 at max. Okay, so it looks like this isn't going to factorize, which means that we need to use the quadratic equation for this. So let's rub these double brackets out. This is just what it takes, a bit of trial and error, a few number combinations, and we know which method we're going to use to actually solve for x here. So a is 4, b is -6, c is 1. So x equals minus b, so +6, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a, which is 8. So let's input this into our calculator. Again, starting off with a plus sign, and then for the second value of x, we change the plus for a minus. So just as shown here, let's input that into our calculator. So assuming 2 decimal places, the first value for x will be 1.31. Now, on this equation on our calculator, when we change the plus to a minus to get the second value of x, again to 2dp, that will give us 0.19. Last two questions now. Again, this is not in the right format, so let's take this 10 over because it needs to equal 0 here. So we need to solve 2x squared plus 8x minus 10 equals 0. Let's get our double brackets ready. Two numbers and multiply to give us 2. Two numbers and multiply to give us minus 10. So we got 2 and 1, 5 and 2, cross multiply, 10 and 2. So yeah, to get 8, positive 8, we need to do plus 10 minus 2. So this can be factorized, and these are our double brackets. 2x and 2, x and 5. So we're going to do plus 10x minus 2x, and then minus 2 multiplied by plus 5 gives us minus 10 here. So when we solve for x will be 1 and x will be minus 5. Final question now. Format is correct. Now this is example 1, so we just need two numbers that multiply to give us minus 12, but add or minus to give us plus 1. I can think of plus 4 and minus 3. Plus 4 times minus 3 gives us minus 12. Plus 4 minus 3 gives us just 1. Therefore, the values of x will be minus 4, and the second value will be plus 3. Okay, hopefully you got all of those right. If you found any difficulties with these questions, please go over the methodology used in order to work out these questions, to find out where it is that you're struggling. I hope you found this video useful in this part of the algebra series. In the next part, we are going to be looking at simultaneous equations and how to solve those. So I will see you in the next one.